Welcome to The Right Chamber, the podcast that takes you inside the NHS to explore what really makes a hospital.
Each episode, we sit down with the people who keep healthcare moving, from doctors, nurses on the front line, to students, the support teams, administrators, corporate staff, and everyone in between. These are the voices that often go unheard, but together they form the heartbeat of our hospitals.
Our aim is simple: to share authentic stories that are accessible to the public, meaningful to NHS staff, and a reminder that healthcare is more than treatments and wards. It's a whole community working together.
So whether you're part of the NHS family or simply curious about the people behind the service, join us as we open the doors to the conversations that matter here in the Right Chamber.
Peter Lowe is the Group Director of Improvement for Sandwell and West Birmingham NHS Trust and the Dudley Group NHS Foundation Trust. Since his MBA in Executive Leadership over 10 years ago, Peter's been fascinated by the values, attributes and behaviours that leaders can practice to create a learning organisation where everyone is confident and competent to tackle daily problems and work towards making patient care and experience better every day.
Welcome back to the Right Chamber podcast. My name is Jasprit.
My name is Victor.
And today we have Peter Lowe.
Hi.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, sure. Thank you for having me. Yes, I'm Peter. I'm Group Director of Improvement at Sandwell West Birmingham and here at the Dudley Group as well. I've been working in the NHS for nearly 25 years.
Oh,
Actually started out in IT, that they call digital now. So worked my way up through sort of service desk and technical support into leadership roles and got as far as Deputy Chief Information Officer. The biggest thing that I did in that role, the biggest sort of program of work, was to implement the patient record, digital patient record. And that was a far too big a piece of work. It's quite scary. It was £32 million business case, which I took through board, and then I ran a big public sector procurement process to choose which supplier we were going to use. And I was really keen that I didn't want it to be an IT decision. I wanted it to be a clinical decision and a staff decision. So we had lots and lots of doctors and nurses looking at all the different products and scoring the solutions and coming up with which one they wanted. And then I built a team of people to develop the system and implement it. And took 2 years, but actually we went live with the first part, and that was, I think it's something like 6 weeks late, but on a 2-year program, that was not so bad, and it was slightly under budget, so I was pleased with that. There was still loads more to do, but we went live with the first part, which was using tablets at the bedside for a nurse to capture vital signs of patients, so using the news scores, and really trying to make sure we identified sepsis in that golden hour, and so that you can actually save people's lives by identifying sepsis early. So that went really well, and the chief exec said to me, so you've got that one going, Peter. I'd like you to move on to a different trust-wide transformational program now. I want you to create a culture of continuous improvement.
Oh.
And I was looking around, who's she talking to? Because I've got no idea what that even meant. This was back in 2018. And from there, I went on a massive learning curve. I spoke to as many different people.
So prior to that point, you actually wasn't very deep into it?
I didn't know what it was.
So what is continuous improvement?
What is continuous improvement? So it's about always striving for better. And every single member of staff here in the trust, if you speak to them for a couple of minutes and ask about their passion, they all have ideas about how they could make the care and the services that we provide for patients better. But there are always reasons why those ideas get stuck and don't get put into place. Sometimes it's just people's belief of things won't work, or they're not allowed the time. And so the improvement team that I've built up, their role is to help people put their ideas into practice to improve patient care. And there are lots of principles and training and values that go with that. but it's really about empowering people and making them confident and competent to make improvements in their own area of work.
What is like the biggest reason that ideas don't become reality?
I think there's people get very burnt by experience in the past where things haven't worked, or where you often hear people say, oh, well, we tried that 10 years ago and it didn't work, or I've been saying this for years and nothing ever happens. So there's a bit there about belief and almost a learnt helplessness that just takes some encouragement and giving people a bit of confidence and believing in people. It also requires a certain style of leadership, which is my passion. I've really developed a keen interest in what type of leadership is required to help create a culture of continuous improvement where people are always striving to make things better and always learning. We talk about a learning organisation where learning in itself is celebrated, even if you don't get something right first time, and even if things go a bit wrong and not as you expect. If you can capture the learning, then that's a good thing. And that's what we mean by a learning organisation. It's absolutely fundamental to continuous improvement.
So it's not all totally on the end product. It's more of how today you are better than yesterday. You've done something to improve from what your previous attempt was. Okay. Oh, that's really...
It eventually will lead you to the end product because you're looking at what went wrong. Let's try to fix this and then move on to the next step.
And then reevaluating.
It's definitely about improving and measurable improvement with data to show that our services and our care is getting better. But you make a really good point about it's about comparing with your performance previously and less about comparing your performance on the national league tables, which is what the NHS is famous for. Where are we nationally? Where are we compared to this trust? So in improvement terms, we like to use data in a different way, which allows us to be curious about what's happening and to celebrate improvement on our own performance in previous months or years, and less so much about where are we compared to someone else.
I'm just thinking as well on kind of like the challenges. Is it also something you come across where people are maybe over ambitious or feel like this thing I want to implement is just so big, it's beyond me? Should I even bother entertaining this idea? Do you ever come across that?
All the time, Victor. It is. I mean, I think it's human nature that we get daunted by really scary kind of goals and ambitions, and that can sometimes paralyze us a bit and think, well, it's going to be so difficult, let's not even bother trying or even starting. But that's absolutely the sort of support that we can provide in the improvement team, is to help people, first of all, set themselves a really well thought out vision and a goal, and then help people break that down into manageable stages and help them use some structure to make something that might seem really daunting into something that is actually more believable, and using lots of different approaches that we have to suit different people and different challenges. We can help them move step by step and celebrate successes as they go, use data to notice what's happening and really analyse the changes that they're making. It's very much an iterative process. It's different to project management, where you might have a plan set out for all the way to your goal over a whole year. Improvement is a different approach, where it's about learning as you go, trying things, taking a scientific approach to problem solving and learning.
This scientific approach, so it's... Could you explain that in a little bit more detail? How does that link to that making improvements and the iterative changes that you mentioned?
Yeah, so there are lots of attributes and behaviours that I think make up a style of leadership which is starting to emerge now, called improvement leadership. There are lots and lots of hundreds of books on it, on different styles of leadership. If you go to the library, there's so many different sorts of compassionate leadership. There's servant leadership, transactional leadership, distributed leadership, loads and loads of different sorts.
I just thought leadership was like leadership.
Yeah.
And what you won't find at the moment is a book called Improvement Leadership. It's a new, in recent years, an emerging sort of subset, but very specifically is about creating the right conditions and the leadership behaviours that can help people develop their capability and their confidence to solve their own problems. I am currently doing an executive diploma in improvement leadership, so I know it exists, but it's still really new and fresh, and I find it really exciting. So any leadership style you could describe as being made up of values, so things like trust, values, care, respect, responsibility, things like that you might say are values. And then on top of those values, you have attributes, so sort of personal components of your personality and how you behave with people. So things like being curious, being humble, and those are attributes of an improvement leader. And then there's the practical element of a leadership style, and that's how you interact with people in your daily work, the behaviours, and that's the bit that I think is most important, because it's about practicing to develop a particular style. So, for example, listening is a very underrated skill to develop. It actually takes a lot of practice to listen really well, but if you can develop your listening ability so that rather than listening to fix or listening to be right, which is a quite common, you might even catch yourself doing it when you're listening. You think, oh yeah, I know the answer to this one, and you'd still try and listen, but you've already got an idea in your head about the solution to someone's problem. Or you might, we're human, we like being right. So often you'll see people listening with that sort of frame, or they've always got the internal monologue that is racing away, which actually detracts from someone listening with true fascination. If you think about someone sort of leaning in close and saying, I've got something to tell you, in that moment, you will have fascination. Your eyes will light up and you'll see, and you think, yeah, what have you got to tell me? But then it disappears and it's just momentary fascination. If we can really nurture that listening with fascination, being really curious about what someone has got to say and not trying to finish their sentence for them and assuming that we know how they're going to finish their sentence, continue listening and ask yourself, I wonder what they're going to say next. Be curious about how this sentence is going to finish. Allow that person to finish their own thought. And it's almost similar to meditation in a way, is letting go of all the thoughts that come into your head so you can stay present with the person who has got the idea and has got that amazing thing they want to tell you about their service or about the care they're providing. So that's just one example of an improvement leadership behaviour to practice. But there are lots, and you asked me specifically about scientific thinking. This is something where rather than reacting on autopilot to a situation, we all have kind of autopilots or biases that control the way we think and we behave, and they actually get us through life. We need those biases, but they're not always helpful. So when you're presented with a problem in your day-to-day job, you may think, oh, I've seen this before. I remember this happened 10 years ago. I know what to do. I recognise this. So you've got a learnt response, and you jump very quickly to thinking that what you're presented with right now is just the same as it was when you experienced this 10 years ago. So you then think, right, we'll do the same as we did before. You jump straight to kind of action. But it may be a very, very different situation. Different people involved, for sure. Maybe a different service, different situation. And so we need to stay present for a bit longer to understand what is happening and to use data. Let's get some facts, let's get some evidence here rather than just jump to conclusions. Again, the role of leader there is very much to help someone start to think scientifically in that way. Okay, so what's the data telling us? Great question, to get focused on fact rather than, our beliefs or assumptions.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. And that, what you've said just kind of reminds me of that kind of type 1, type 2 thinking. I'm not sure where that originated from. But, that kind of type 1 thinking, which is very much reactive, human nature, where it's all about kind of patterns that we see. And often we just do things throughout the day, kind of in autopilot mode, like you said. But having that little bit of extra time to take a step back and then actually evaluate the data, evaluate where we currently are, and then it will help us make better decisions to get to the next stage of where we want to go.
Yeah, I'm glad you remember that, because I think you came on some of our training.
Yes, I remember that.
We talked about, it was a guy called Daniel Kahneman that came up with this way of understanding how we think in different ways, and he called it System 1 and System 2 thinking. And just as you say, System 1 is that automatic, very powerful, quick, emotional response to a situation. But they're the habits that we have to get through life. If you didn't have System 1 habits, it would take you hours and hours just to get ready for work in the morning. You don't think about how to tie your shoelaces. You've learned a skill, you've passed it over to your habit, to your System 1. But System 2 is where the scientific thinking comes in, and that's much better for complex problem solving. It's slower, it's much more rational, and you really have to, you're much more aware of that type of thinking. So scientific thinking is the System 2 that you need to develop and nurture and be encouraged to use when solving really complex problems that we get in healthcare.
So where in healthcare would you want to see the System 2 thinking evolve a lot more?
Every day, in every role, when you're faced with a problem or a challenge or something, as you said, something that seems almost impossible, we want to develop that rational approach where we sort of say, okay, we know how to tackle problems. Let's sit down together. Let's understand this. Let's ask for some different opinions. It's not just my view. Let's ask the ward clerk for their role in this. What's your experience of this situation? What we've noticed is that people are coming into the clinic, and they're looking around. They're not sure where reception is. What do you see? Okay, so this is all cool. The data is saying that it's taking longer to get through a clinic appointment. But actually, we've been curious and we found that some of that time is because people aren't finding reception that quickly. And it's a really simple example, but by breaking that down, getting other people's opinions, looking at the data, then we're starting to think scientifically and solve problems in that way.
And so this is not just something for a select few of staff members. Everyone can be an improvement
Yes,
leader?
yeah. So everyone can be an improver. If you think across Sandwell and West Birmingham and the Dudley Group, there is something in the region of 14,000 staff. I personally believe we're tapping into a small fraction of that improvement capability or capacity in those organisations. And the role of the improvement team is to try and develop that capability in 14,000. But imagine if 14,000 people knew that it was their responsibility to do their job well and also to improve the work that they do. If we could tap into and harness that capacity, we would be world-class organisation. We would have people from all around the world wanting to come and see how do you do it? And we'd say, well, we empower and develop our staff to solve problems. So improvement capability is for absolutely everyone. Improvement leadership, I guess, is for those people that have a bit more influence in their teams because of their position. And their role is sometimes to get involved in the problem solving, but much more, I believe, is their role to help their teams problem solve. And that way, rather than all problems finishing up on the line manager's desk, which is too much work and causes delays, and you can't expect one person to solve all the ward's problems, but that's quite often what happens. That line manager could say, I've got ideas about how you might fix this problem, but I'm really interested to hear your thoughts first because you brought it to me. So you're experiencing that problem firsthand. So what are your thoughts? Start with that. And just stay curious long enough to hear what someone else's thoughts are. And then rather than taking it away from the person, saying, okay, leave that with me, I'll get it fixed. And we like to do that because, we want to be helpful people. So it comes from a good place. But actually in that moment, we're taking the ownership away from that person who had the idea. And even if we do get it fixed, that person can't be proud of that accomplishment. And we've created a dependency on the line manager to fix the next problem. And this is what eventually builds up over time and becomes firefighting. And that's the most common expression I hear when you talk to staff who are, we all know that there's way more work than there are staff to do the work. So we need to be making the absolute best of our staff, the best use of that time. And most people say we're in firefighting mode. And we're stuck. And we can't, people say to me, I haven't got time for improvement. Do you have any idea how busy we are? And I think there's a real irony there because if we can improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the way we work, it will actually free up time to care and free up time to provide better services, which ultimately will be better for the patient, better for staff. And you know what? They'll be more cost effective as well.
So like you said that there are people who will be involved in improvement capabilities and someone involved with improvement leadership. How can anyone get involved with either of these in the hospital?
Absolutely. So that's why we're here. And we have a whole range of improvement training to suit anyone and any situation. And we will help guide you through to decide which training might suit you. I'm always the one that says you don't develop a skill in the classroom. So you can come on some training. We're not going to give you a certificate for that because all you've done is hopefully listened and maybe got some ideas and absorbed some information. You haven't developed a skill. It's only through practice. And this is why we use the term improvement practice. It's only through practice that you start to develop that skill of improvement capability. So after training, we will come out and see you in your workplace. We'll sit with you and help understand the problems you're facing or the ambition and the idea that you have for your service. And then we'll work through and help you apply the ideas or the tools that you heard about in the training and put them into practice. And then when you've done that, then we'll give you a certificate.
So it's very much a hands-on supported
It really is.
Environment. That's amazing.
I actually think probably 10% of what we do in the improvement team is deliver training. And there are some organisations who spend most of their time delivering training and they measure success by saying, we've trained 70, 80% of the staff, but there's very little practice. And so you haven't got that capability or tapping into that vast capacity that I talk about.
Do you want to see the outcome of the training?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And with data. So people often say, did it work? And they'll say, well, it feels better. And we'll say, so, okay, it's great that it feels better. And feelings and, we're human beings, so it does count. But can we see some data that show that it's actually got closer to your aspirations for where that particular process or that service wanted to get to? What were your goals? Getting people to express data in a way that really connects with people rather than puts people off. That's a big part of it, using data. And a lot of people are scared of data. And you see so much data land on people's desks in the NHS. We're overwhelmed with targets and metrics and tables. And we help people break that down, tap into the bits that are useful, and then express that in a way that tells a story and that creates fascination from people saying, oh, that's interesting. What's happening there? Or what happened on that day that's caused the data to do that? What can we learn from that? Ultimately, we want to use data to help us make decisions and to learn.
Wow. And what I find striking is, yes, this is primarily kind of about the NHS environment, but you can very much kind of just apply this kind of thinking to just daily life and improving, and how you can be better, how you can analyze where you are, look for tangible data to make those analysis, and think about improvements that you can then make.
Yeah, absolutely. It does apply. We do joke that don't take improvement tools home. And if I were to apply some of the practices that I use at work with my wife, then I think I'd probably fall out and have arguments around that. So we do something like organising a workplace so that you've got the things that you need most often closest to hand. And that's about arranging a ward or even a desk in a way that makes the best use of that space to allow you to be most efficient in how you work. There's a lot of sense in that, and a vast amount of time is wasted looking for things or walking up and down the ward to go and get something that you need 20 times a day. Just by thinking, okay, well, let's rearrange where we store things so that the things we need most are just there, right where you need them. But if you took that home and said, look, why have we got all the mugs in this cupboard? I need them over. You'd get into all sorts of trouble. So yeah, it doesn't always translate to home. Some of the things you were saying there, I'm really fascinated in so the psychology of learning and psychology of improving. And there's things like science of motivation and how people get motivated to take ownership of a project. And again, this all links back to leadership behaviours. So by understanding what motivates someone, there's a book I like called Drive by Dan Pink. He talks about autonomy, mastery and purpose. So first of all, staff need to feel that they are trusted to get on with their jobs and that they have autonomy and they're not being micromanaged, right down, because that's kind of taking away the value. So feeling that you've got autonomy to do your job well is a great motivator in itself. Mastery is about noticing that you're getting better and you're developing skills and developing more capabilities. Even if you're not, chasing the career ladder, you still want to feel that you're being invested in and you're getting the opportunity to develop in any chosen way that you want to. So mastery, that's what that means. And purpose, a lot of what we do is helping a team have an understanding as to what they're striving for. But it has to be a collaborative exercise. Very often, the reason that a project will fail is because they didn't spend enough time understanding purpose at the beginning. And you can get 3-6 months down the line and everything starts falling apart. And you say, so what were we trying to achieve? Ask different people and you'll get different answers. And you suddenly realize, well, no wonder this didn't work. So that purpose and helping people understand the purpose really clearly is a big part of motivation. That was just an example of some of the sort of psychology that there is as well.
That's very interesting. Wow. So,
I think it's also important for the staff. If you're a leader, your staff needs to feel psychological safe to be able to answer your questions and then move on from there as well.
I mean, this is another passion of mine. I'm pleased that you mention it. Psychological safety is absolutely fundamental to improvement. Improvement cannot happen. I'll say it as boldly as that. Improvement cannot happen without psychological safety. And that is simply because if you don't feel safe to express your ideas that might be different to everyone else's, or that might be different to the way we do something now, you will have ideas. And every single person has got ideas about how we could do things differently. But if you can't say them out loud, then we'll just continue doing what we've always done and we'll always get what we've always got. So you need psychological safety. And that's the ability to, the belief that if you say something, you won't be punished. I don't mean punished like taken to HR. I mean punished by the way you're treated in your social group. So even just someone rolling their eyes when you make a suggestion, you're being punished because you think, oh, yeah, I feel really bad.
We even like the tone of voice that
The
changes.
tone of voice, yeah. And we do that. So often we will have those micro expressions accidentally, but they can cause the lack of psychological safety. And you only need to experience kind of that punishment, that social feeling once to stop you volunteering an idea next time. It takes quite a lot of bravery to speak out about what might be different. So a lot of what my team do is help leaders understand what psychological safety is and how you might start to create it and why it's so important in order to improve services. And there's some simple things that you can do. Listening is a big part of it. Don't interrupt someone because straight away you're assuming that your thoughts are more important than the person speaking. Sometimes big groups are quite scary to speak up in. So we did some work with a department and they had a huddle in every morning, and the matron would give out all the information, we've got a new starter, can you make sure you get your mandatory training done, and all this sort of information passing out. There's probably 30 or 40 people in a big circle. And so we listened in on this and we said, it was really nice that so many people turn up. That's brilliant. Next step would be maybe see if you can get some people saying something so it's not just one way. See if you can get people to speak. And so she said, okay, yeah, I'll give that a go. So the next morning, gave out all the information and then said, has anyone else got anything they'd like to share? So of course you can imagine, can't you? Everyone was looking around, looking down, everything.
Avoid eye contact.
Avoiding eye contact. No one wanted to say anything. And so we said, okay, that's the first step. You invited them to speak. So he said, why do you think people didn't want to say anything? And it's like, well, it's a big group of people, didn't want to be judged was the main thing that came up. I didn't want to be judged by my colleagues for speaking up. Okay, so how could we break it down a bit? So what we did, instead of it being all together in one big huddle, broke it down into specialties within that service. And they had a huddle with more like 6 to 8 people. Felt a lot more comfortable to start with. And then we encouraged people just to come forward on a hoverboard to write ideas, really, really simple, small ideas, and put them up on the board. And you could do that anonymously. But gradually, people gained a bit of confidence and they saw their ideas started to get put into practice. And then over time, it doesn't happen straight away, but over time, when that question came, has anyone got any ideas to share? People would say, well, actually, I've got something. And it's so important, to treat that first person that's speaking with respect and to really be interested and genuinely fascinated with their idea and encouraging, even if as the leader you think, oh, they've really, that's not going to work, or you're going to have those thoughts. But it's better to let that person be allowed to experiment and learn for themselves in a safe environment. We're not talking about risky situations where you might risk patient care. Of course, we would never risk safety. But you can create environments where it's safe to experiment and learn. So there's lots more about psychological safety.
Wow, that is very, very interesting. That is very interesting. And it makes me think about kind of my own response as well to, when people are bringing ideas and you don't think how important your role might be in that situation to actually, open the floor to ideas, because you never know how many new novel ideas you might shut down if you respond the wrong way. And you think back to so many great innovations and inventions. I'm sure when people came up with that idea for the very first time, it might not have sounded like the greatest thing, especially when it's different to what we're used to, isn't it? We've covered quite a lot, and there's a lot for our viewers to go back and digest. Just any final remarks or signposting that you'd like to do for events coming up or resources that people could access?
So we do have lots of resources. As I said, we've got lots of training that's all continuous professional development accredited. So if you want CPD points, then that's available as well. The training's all available. You can email us directly improvement.dgft@nhs.net, or at Sandwell it's improvement.swbh@nhs.net. And we will help you look at the problem that you've got or the ambition that you've got and help signpost you to the right support. We also work with organisational development, but on leadership development, which, as you've heard, is one of my passions. And we can do bespoke things as well. So if you've got a team that you're working with and there's a particular area that you want to develop or a particular need, then speak to us and we'll put something together for you.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Peter. It's been very lovely having you on the podcast. And I think that brings us nicely to the end of today's podcast. Thank you so much for everyone tuning in who's listening. As usual, feel free to interact with us, comment, like, share, and also get in touch with us if you would like to participate in future podcasts. Right, we'll leave you there. Thank you very much. Remember to stay connected with us on social media. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at RGUCMS, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, RGUC Media, for more exclusive content and updates. Thanks for tuning in to the Right Chamber podcast. Until next time.